Admissions Counseling. Today, we are talking about how to write your way into a top MBA program. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are in the world. Let's get started. First, I'm going to presume that you guys can read, and I'm not going to read out anything on slides, and neither will Jennifer, but my name is Susan Cera. I am with Stratus Admissions, and one reason that I do what I do in admissions counseling is because I spent 10 years on admissions committee at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. And during that time, I read hundreds, maybe thousands of applications. And there were times where I knew in my heart that an applicant was stronger than what they were presenting through their application. Yet I could only evaluate them on what was in the application. And it's for that reason that 5 years ago, I joined Stratus. And now I get great satisfaction out of being able to help individuals, young professionals, uncover their unique stories and present them in the best way possible through their applications. And it's incredibly rewarding to be getting emails that someone's been accepted to their top choice program, or they've been invited to interview, or they got a great scholarship. So that's why I do what I do, and I'm glad to be here to share some insights along with my colleague Jennifer, who will now introduce herself.
Hi there. I'm so glad to be with everybody today or this evening, possibly this morning, but probably not. We're glad that you're here. And what I just like to point out here on this slide is just the sort of the way that my career has come full circle to land me here doing what I absolutely love. So I started out in public relations, where I focused on a company's external brand. And then I move on to human capital consulting, where we work on an employer brand and making your company the most attractive to the best people to help you carry out your strategy. And now at Stratus, I get to work with people on their personal brands. And I absolutely love what I do. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of that personal branding and compelling narrative as we get into writing of the essays during this webinar. Okay, so some of you may have heard of Stratus. We've been around for, I guess, 14 years now. And really what I like to call out here is just simply what we think a couple of our main differentiators are, which is the team approach that we have. All of our counselors have MBAs from top programs. And when you work with us in a comprehensive process, you get access to a lot of different counselors formally at formal kind of milestones or touch points. You have different people from different top MBA programs reviewing your materials. And then also we have a four-school guarantee. And what that means is in round one, if you sign up for 4 schools with us, you get to work on, and you come up short, maybe you went all for your stretchiest of the stretch schools, you come up short, you can turn around and we'll work with you on 2 additional schools at no cost in round 2. So we are very proud of our work, and we're happy to get into the agenda right now. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how schools are going to look at all of you. And we're going to go through some MBA essay do's and don'ts, and then just a little bit on next steps, and we'd be happy to take questions as well. So go ahead, Susan, take it away.
And if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the text box. Jennifer and I are new to this technology, but we are learning as we go on the fly, and Jennifer will be looking at questions along the way. Some we will hold to the end, some we may be able to address as we go. In terms of areas for evaluation, one thing to point out here is that there are 2 phases to MBA admissions in terms of picking a class. The first is evaluation, in which your application is evaluated vis-a-vis criteria for a particular school and what they want to put together for a class. So imagine, if you will, a report card on a number of different areas. You want to have the highest points possible. Once candidates are evaluated, and there are, for probably every single school, there are more qualified candidates for a class than there are seats in that class, the admissions committee then needs to move to the next phase, which is selection. In looking at all of those folks who are qualified, who are the ones who are going to get a seat in that class. So in terms of areas for evaluation, every school is going to do this a little bit differently, but they do look at you holistically. And there's not one thing that's going to get you into school, and also there's not one thing that will keep you out of a top school. So these 5 areas are as follows. And imagine, as I said, that you're going to get a grade in each, say an A through an F. You want more A's and B's than you have C's and D's. And if you have any F's, chances are you may have a fast pass to the ding pile. So the first area for evaluation is your academics and your quantitative readiness. Essentially, what they're trying to assess is your ability to do the work in the program. So things they're going to be looking at with respect to your readiness on the academics front are where you went to undergrad, what your grades were, what you studied, and what your test score is, be it the GMAT, the GRE, and in some instances now the executive assessment. If they have any concerns, they may dig deeper into what the specifics are in your transcript, look at additional coursework you've taken, etc. The next area for evaluation is your professional experience. So they're going to look beyond just how many years of work experience you have, but they're going to want to look at what you've accomplished during that time. Have you been promoted ahead of your peers? Do you have experience managing people, projects, or budgets? Have you worked on cross-functional teams? Do you have global exposure? Do you have any gaps in your work experience? Have you showed progress over time, either within a single company or between different roles across companies? So that's the second area for evaluation. The third area is going to be your leadership and community engagement. For most business schools who are admitting classes with profiles of on average 4 to 5 years of work experience, many of those individuals have not had formal leadership or management experience in the workplace. So they look for outside opportunities to start developing their leadership skills. In the end, business schools are trying to groom future leaders in business and society. You can't go in with 0 leadership experience and expect to come out a leader. So they want to see what you've done in the past. The fourth area for evaluation is your recommendations. Typically, you're going to have one from your current immediate supervisor, and then you can select one additional person to provide support for you. You want to identify someone who's going to go to bat for you, who knows you really well and will be able to share specific details about the impact you've made, the contributions you've had to that organization, and shed some light on how you have done what you did and what specifically differentiates you from others who are in similar roles. And the final piece, which is where we're going to drill down today, is your essays. Now, you can't change anything about your undergrad GPA. It is what it is. It's set in stone. You're not going to make major changes to your work if you're applying later this year. That's pretty solid. The one area where each and every one of you can get an A is on your essays, and it's on you to do the research about both yourself and the schools and bringing it all together in wonderfully written essays. So with that, we're going to share a story about a client we worked with who did an especially good job in terms of his writing. This guy had rather soft academics. He had attended 2 different schools, did not have great grades. He worked for several companies over the course of his career, and his work experience was rather jumpy. He did have some really strong leadership and community involvement, which led to really fabulous recommendations. But what really brought him over the top to land a full scholarship at one of his top schools was the story that he told, in reflecting on what was meaningful to him, what he was looking to accomplish in the future, and how this particular school was going to help him get there. He ended up becoming, as I said, he got a full scholarship to his top choice school, where he was a poster boy for kind of a distance traveled story of having been a child of immigrants in the US and making it on, struggling through some hard times with his family, but then moving on to be at this prestigious university on a full scholarship. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer to talk about MBA Essay Do's.
Okay. So for the do's, we want to make sure that we don't jump, we meaning the applicant, you don't want to jump in as soon as prompts are released and just start banging away at your keyboard to knock out the word limit. This is something that we really want to spend time thinking about and doing research like Susan was talking about. And this is a lifetime investment. Probably the biggest investment you'll make in your future is to get this degree, maybe just besides a house. It's going to be the biggest one you make in your life probably. And it's really an investment not only in your career, but in your life as far as the network of relationships and friends and just people that you know for the rest of your life. So these are all very important things that we're talking about here. Key themes: take a structured approach, be authentic, be yourself. And we're going to dig deeper into all of these in the coming slides here.
Excellent. So in terms of self-reflection, we at Stratus, when we're working with our clients, we go through a series of introspection activities that often take 4 to 6 weeks to go through. We ask questions like, what really motivates you? What landmark experiences have shaped your life to date? And how have they shaped the direction you want to take moving forward? We want to understand really what you are passionate about and why you are passionate about that. And that will drive your career aspirations. So where do you see yourself 20, 30 years from now? And working backwards from there, what's that short-term goal that you want to achieve coming out of business school? We'll look at what experiences you have up until this point in time that you will build on through business school in order to achieve that goal. And we also will work backwards from your short-term goal to help you understand what your areas for development are during an MBA program so that you're set up for success as you come out. And once you know what those areas for development are, you can drive your school research. Another important thing that many people overlook is what they can bring to an MBA program. I spoke earlier about evaluation versus selection. Many of the people who miss that selection portion and are left behind as the ding pile are those who fail to share what they bring to a program. How are they going to contribute to make the experience for all their classmates better? And it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but you just have to understand that your presence in any program should add value to the entire cohort. So another story here is about a client that I worked with over the course of actually 2 years. He was from India, had not attended a top university as an undergrad, had a 720 GMAT, so kind of average stats, came from a really overrepresented demographic. And at the time he was applying, he had worked in the oil and gas industry, so it was an industry in crisis, and lots of young professionals were fleeing that industry in order to go to business school and find a new direction out of oil and gas to ride out what was a couple of years ago, a recession in that space, which is now kind of even more so in the oil and gas. And instead of focusing on using an MBA to transition out of oil and gas into clean and renewable energy that a lot of young professionals were saying, as this individual and I went through introspection, what he began to focus on was the human side of the oil and gas industry. He personally had observed the big hiring when the oil prices went up, only for these people to be let go when prices went down. And he wanted to focus on the human capital side of the oil and gas industry to figure out better ways to flatten out those peaks and troughs in human resources, and helping the companies to stay less focused on short-term profits and more on developing employees over time. And he shifted then to be looking at human capital and identified things that he needed to learn about in business school so that he could go back to his company and help help the company to best balance employee retention and growth with the cyclical nature of the industry. And he ended up landing a spot at Columbia, and he just graduated last spring. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Jennifer to talk about building a story.
Okay. As you think about how to build a story, I'm sure you've heard this over and over, and I've already said it today, compelling narrative, tell your story. What does that mean? So you can think about it like you need to answer why MBA, why now, and why at X school, Y school, or Z school. And as part of that, all of your unique and interesting parts of your background are going to come through. So let me put a little, kind of give a little bit of life to that. So think about what your short-term goal is and how your experience so far might have prepared you. And we're not just talking about your work experience. It might be extracurricular activities. It might be your personal background, a lot of different interests that you have, patterns of involvement in certain things that you're passionate about over time. All of that serves to prepare you to reach your goals. So looking at what you've already done that will help you, and then looking at your goal, what do you need from an MBA to fill what those gaps are? What is the knowledge? What are the skills? Which are the relationships that you need? It might be with industry leaders. It will certainly be with your peers, with professors, with alumni, with mentors, allies, all of that. And then think about what you bring to an MBA program. All of you have unique experiences and a different perspective. And there are definitely more and more really cool and fascinating backgrounds that applicants have, which is not to say that somebody coming from consulting or banking or financial services at all is unwelcome, because of course the schools still want the traditional candidates as well, but it helps to build a diverse class when they can pull from as many different industries, functions, geographies as they possibly can. So I came from a really untraditional background in public relations, especially that many years ago, more than 2 decades. And I could add that communication piece to the class discussions we were having. And HBS, as you probably know, is 99.5% case method. And so we rely on our peers to learn from. So Lord knows I relied on my peers for all the quantitative work, and then I was able to help add in some of the softer skill areas. And so even if you think you might not have the right background, you have an interesting background that can add to an MBA class. So let's talk about someone who did a great job telling her story. This was a client who she did come to us with a high GPA. She went to an Ivy League school and she had a good GMAT score. So on paper, she certainly looked super qualified. But as we were saying before, these schools are so competitive that they're turning down classes full of candidates like this. She worked in strategy at a large bank holding company, and her challenge, like a lot of people's, is how do I differentiate myself? And after the self-reflection and introspection process and the coming up with her key themes, the answer really was to draw on her extracurriculars and her leadership experiences. So it turned out she was really interested in fashion and was volunteering at a fashion incubator, giving entrepreneurs in the fashion industry here in DC, where I live, to draw on more resources so they can help build their businesses. And we spent a lot of time digging into this story and what motivated her. And her long-term goal was to run her own incubator on a larger scale than the one she was already working at. And what she needed from the MBA was leadership and entrepreneurship skills. And she just really had to kind of nail this story. And a lot of people have these stats, but telling that story with the pieces of her work experience, but even more so for her, the extracurricular experience was absolutely critical. And remember, the application process is a very human process. Admissions officers are people, they're very pleasant people, and they want to, a lot of times they even say, we want to look for reasons to accept people. They want to, and if you can show them that they need to be able to get you, and you want to show them that you've got this clear story. They get where you're trying to go, and they get how their school fits in to helping you get there. That will help. That will go a long way to having this compelling narrative that you need. So let's move on to key themes. So we mean a couple things when we talk about key themes. So first, we'll talk about key themes for you. In introspection and self-reflection, you're coming up with some key themes about yourself. So perhaps you're an inspirational leader or a creative problem solver. Maybe you're a cultural bridge between headquarters and a specific country, or you're a connector of people. Think about who you are, and all these experiences build into, coming up with your themes. So then you want to learn what the key themes of different schools you're looking at are. And this is just a couple different examples. So every school has its own themes and buzzwords. You can learn these quite easily from the website. And you want to connect your themes with the themes of each school. What you don't want to do is kind of not be true to who you are by thinking that your theme should be exactly what the schools are, but instead try to work them in together. So Berkeley, for example, is about a third the size of HBS. It's a very different culture. You want to kind of understand where each school is coming from and how you can fit in. Even with the same essay prompt, you're not going to be able to use the same essay at different schools because you need to incorporate their themes into your own essays. Sometimes people think in the optional essay, they just absolutely loved an essay they did for, let's say, Haas, and they're just going to take that and copy and paste it into a Wharton essay prompt. And that's just really a bad idea. The schools know what their competitors are asking every year, and they know when you've done that, and we definitely don't recommend it. So you want to first come up with your own themes about yourself, and then figure out how you might be able to work those in to show that you are a great fit for each school. So with that, I'll hand it to Susan for a candidate that did a great job on this.
Yeah, this candidate had a really great story that we uncovered through introspection. He had grown up in a family where his parents were divorced. His mother had a terrible accident that left her really in tough shape, went through a divorce and was in and out of homelessness. Yet on the other side, his father was really in great shape. And as a junior high and high school student, he had gone back and forth between these two worlds. One day getting picked up in his father's Mercedes from basketball practice, the next weekend trying to figure out what items he could buy at the grocery store with his mother's food stamps. And this led to an acute awareness of the challenges that different people face. And this then morphed over time as he went into investment banking and then left investment banking to go into the Peace Corps in Latin America, to a cultural awareness of just a willingness to see the world through different perspectives, and then to support others in their growth and facing their challenges. And not surprisingly, his top choice school was Kellogg, which is notorious for being a really supportive and collaborative experience. And we were able, through his essays, to tell this story of growing up across two very disparate family groups, even though it was the same family, how he leveraged what he learned through that in his work with Indigenous people in Colombia and helping them start businesses. And going to Colombia, he wanted to develop skills to be able to make a bigger impact through social entrepreneurship and social impact investing in South and Latin America. So a great outcome for him and a wonderful story. And with that, I will talk about engaging with MBA programs. So when Jennifer and I did this same webinar last summer, we would tell you one thing about engaging with MBA programs. All that has changed with COVID-19. So school visits are out of the question at this point. So you need to be a little bit more adaptable and flexible in doing your research into these different schools. So there are lots of ways to do that. The schools have gotten very creative about increasing materials that are available on their websites, being virtual tours or offering coffee chats with particular affinity groups, or making their student ambassadors more available. So look for these opportunities to connect with individuals who share your interests. Oftentimes, the best first touch might be something on a more personal level rather than reaching out to the consulting club. If that's your goal to go into consulting, you might reach out to someone who is in the tennis club because you have a shared love for tennis. And once you connect with that individual on a very personal level, make an ask for, hey, is there anyone in the tennis club who is transitioning from, back office banking into consulting? Might you connect me with them? Think about reaching out to alumni from your undergrad institution who may be at these MBA programs as a first point of contact to do your research. In terms of specifics you want to be looking for, once you know what your goal is and what your areas for development are through business school, we often talk about using a structure of C's or 4 C's as you look into the schools. So those C's are first, curriculum. Beyond the core curriculum, which is different at each school, what are the electives you might take? Are there concentrations, majors, pathways, or certificates that align with your goals? And think further about teaching methodologies. As Jennifer has mentioned, Harvard is almost entirely case method. The same is the case with UVA in the essay in Spain. Many other programs use a mix of teaching methodologies, some lecture, some case-based, some experiential learning with hands-on projects. In fact, at some schools, experiential learning is the required piece of the core curriculum. For some schools, a global experience is part of their curriculum, required. So think about what's important to you. What is your learning style? How are you best going to learn what you need to learn in business school to set you up to get that short-term job that you're looking for? The next C is clubs. And I use clubs because that's a C word that matches into my whole framework here. But beyond clubs, what are the conferences, seminars, speaker series, business plan competitions, case competitions, career tracks that might be involved at that school? So if, for example, you have an interest in going into the healthcare space, perhaps a school has a healthcare concentration on the curriculum side. Perhaps they have a healthcare club and put on a conference each year. That conference would be a great way for you to work on your leadership skills by raising your hand to organize a panel. And through that, you're negotiating with industry leaders, encouraging them to come and sit on that panel and presenting the value to them. And through this engagement, you're also building relationships with people in the industry that you're targeting upon graduation. For many schools, clubs and outside activities are a great way for you to, in a very safe space where you're not going to lose your job if you miss step, test out some of your classroom learning, whether it be in a case competition or a business plan competition. So explore those clubs as they align with your areas for development. The next C that's important as you engage with these MBA programs and learn about their resources is the community or culture. Getting an MBA, as Jennifer said earlier, this is going to be the biggest investment that you will ever make, other than perhaps buying a home. And for some of you, it may be bigger than buying a home, depending on where you are in the world. This is not just a 2-year decision. This is a 20, 30, or 40-year decision. So think beyond just your 2 years on campus. You want to find a community that you see yourself being part of for the rest of your career. What's important to you? And perhaps you have a significant other who would be going with you. Perhaps you have children. Where are you going to feel comfortable, welcome, and ready to learn and grow? Some schools are really collaborative and supportive. Others are more competitive. What's the right fit for you? I'll lift a story from Jennifer and another former colleague who talk about how, if you just are in Boston and Cambridge, at HBS, they've got kind of a khakis and button-down sort of environment and loafers, you go down the river to MIT and it's a shorts and flip-flops kind of environment. Which is the right one for you? And then the final C, and this is how you engage with the MBA program, is through connections and communication. Use your resources to learn about the program, ask questions about the curriculum, look beyond just what you see on the website to understand truly how you would fit in, both in terms of what you hope to learn and take away, as well as what you will contribute to and what legacy you might leave at that school, or what engagement you see even beyond your 2 years as an alum. So with that, a story of a client that we worked with who did a really great job with exploring schools. She came from a very non-traditional background. She was on the older end in terms of applicants. She was, I think, in her early 30s, maybe 33 years old. Her background had been in hospitality. She had managed large teams at hotels. She had opened restaurants. And as she was preparing to go to business school, she knew she wanted to stay kind of in the operations space. And her thought was that she wanted to be in the beverage industry. She had actually tried to get a startup going. I think it was a distillery, and had misjudged some of the legal aspects of that work, and it had failed within 6 months. But as she researched schools, she connected with students, she connected with admissions committee reps. She just really did her research to figure out where she fit in. And as an older candidate, it was really important that she focus on the community. I actually got to meet her when she came for welcome weekend at Duke. And I asked her, what are the things that are on your mind when you're deciding whether or not this is the right school for you? Because she had multiple options, both with very generous scholarships. And she said, I want to figure out whether my partner and I will feel comfortable here, whether the social aspects of this community are a fit for those of us who are, not 27 or 28 years old, but a little bit further along in our careers and perhaps more settled. And she ended up feeling really great about the community coming out of that weekend. And she went to Duke. She just graduated, I guess it's just about 2 weeks ago now, and she will be heading off she had 5 offers when I last spoke to her around Thanksgiving, and helped her to figure out which of those offers was right. Because again, she was doing her research, bouncing ideas off of a bunch of people, and she's heading off to work in strategy for American Airlines.
Okay, so next we're going to talk about how to take a structured approach to writing. So what we mean by this is, like I said before, you're not just going to get your essay prompt and just jump in. So you want to spend some time thinking about your story, like we've talked about. You want to read the fine print. So the guidance behind the prompt itself is going to provide hints as to what they're looking for. So why Stanford is the question, but they're going to give a lot of additional information to tell you what they want out of that. And just read the directions really carefully. They do not like people who can't follow directions. So I know at Fuqua, they have a specific way they want you to submit your list of 25 random things about yourself. It's a certain font, a certain spacing, certain margins. If you don't do that, they're not going to think that you're going to be a very compelling candidate if you can't follow those directions. So, and then also think about even schools that have no word limit, like HBS, you should just kind of consider that they do have a word limit, because sometimes people just go kind of crazy there, and these schools do not want a 5-page paper from you. They're reading 9,000 or 10,000 applications, HBSs, every year, every admission cycle, and they're not going to be interested in reading a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 word essay from you. So we recommend keeping it quite a bit shorter than that. One of the most important parts of the process is outlining. And a lot of you might have had English classes in the past where you learn how to outline way back when. Some of you may not. It's very painful to some people. Some people don't really mind it. But I'll say, when I've had clients skip the step of outlining, it just doesn't end well, because what what they're trying to do is save time, and what it winds up doing is wasting time because they don't figure out how to sequence or structure their writing. So they just kind of put everything down. They spend time wordsmithing. They spend time kind of crafting nice paragraphs when really we're trying to figure out what content should go where, not exactly how every sentence needs to sound. So at the early stages, you really want to start with outlining. It's very hard to undo writing once you've started it. And outlines just help you put together this framework to answer the question and give you confidence that you're communicating what you want to share about yourself. So it's also really important to do multiple iterations. So this is not something that you do in one sitting. It's a good idea to ask for independent review and feedback from essays. For each set of essays, let them rest for a few days so you can revisit with a fresh set of eyes. And we also recommend for each school you're working on, do a set of outlines together. Like, let's say for Columbia, they have 3 essays. You would do outlines for all 3 together. See how they work together before you write out an entire one and then write out an entirely different one, because then you can maybe take away what's going to wind up overlapping in content and that kind of thing. So it's also super important to show and don't tell. Another thing you learned from English class. Another thing that we hope your recommenders do also, by the way, is not say, oh, Jane is a creative problem solver. We want them to show that you can solve problems creatively by specific examples there. So we want to also really make sure that you proofread. Dot all the I's, cross all the T's. It's absolutely critical because that's a part of your application that you have control over. And any mistakes are just going to make you stand out in a bad way. So let's talk about somebody who did a fabulous job on the structured approach to writing. This was a client who did come to us from a background at a liberal arts college, and they really focused on writing, which absolutely helped her. But I'll say as an aside, you could be a wonderful English major and not be writing a great MBA application essay because it's not necessarily the same kind of writing. It's the main idea is that you have to structure it right and include the right content. It's not that you have to be the most beautiful writer ever, because that's not what you're applying for. You're not trying to get a master's in English. So if you don't think you're an amazing writer, that doesn't really matter. You want clean writing, you want good content, but you want to tell your story and use your voice. So it's okay if you're not master's in English material and probably, in fact, expected. So this client was just so methodical about how she approached the process. She took the outline guides that I provided her and she just tailored her content to each prompt for each school. And it made the essay process so much easier for her because she just had an extremely organized outline that translated into an essay that was almost seamless to write. And when we say outline, we don't mean, Roman numeral 1 with the entire first paragraph you're planning, Roman numeral 2 with the entire second paragraph. It's more just to jog your mind for story about such and such, and then maybe include a few details, but you're not including everything in your outlines because you might need to move things around. And it's this notion of not being able to unwrite something that's important. So her outlines were so good that I joked with her that I wanted her to put on a clinic for other people I was working with, and she thought I was serious and was actually offering to have a clinic, which I thought was funny. But when you do a good job at that, you're gonna write good essays, and it's just a critical part of the process. So she wound up getting a merit scholarship at Fuqua and just wrapped up her first year, became president of her class, and was really helping students connect during the online learning. Like Susan was talking about, engaging with the program. She kept those connections going, and has just been she was easy to work with, and also is a great MBA student, which hopefully all of you will be as well.
Excellent.
Okay, Susan.
Thanks. So now we're going to talk about MBA Essay Don'ts. Like, these are things you should not do. Don't wait. Although the essay prompts are not out yet, you can get started today with self-reflection and be thinking about your goals, thinking about what's important to you, thinking about what your narrative's going to look like. Don't disregard instructions. Jennifer talked about, Duke's certain font size, certain line spacing. Even if you disregard instructions, interestingly, Jennifer and I were at the AGAT conference earlier this week, which is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Counselors. And we were with admissions committee folks from 40 or 50 international MBA programs. And I was in a small group breakout session with Kirsten Moss from Stanford and Michael Robinson from CBS, both of whom were talking, and I felt like I was like observing this insider conversation. They were talking about essay length. And they said they've read enough of these essays, they know what 500 words looks like. And although it may not be held against you that you went over 500 words, if they know that it's like 600 words, it puts something in their brain of, let's look for a pattern here. Are they disregarding instructions elsewhere? So make sure to read the instructions and follow them. Don't approach your essays in a vacuum. Your essays are just one component of your overall application. So it may not make sense, but sometimes if you have a big bullet on your resume that explains a big project that you were involved in, it may not make sense to write about that in an essay as well. So look across all the elements of your application, whether it be the resume, the essays, your short answers on the application, and make sure not to repeat yourself. Use all that real estate as best as possible. Don't reuse content. I often tell people, if you're applying to 5 schools and you try to write one essay and repurpose it for 4 other schools, in the best case scenario, that one essay you write will be the right essay for one school. In the worst case, it'll be the wrong essay for all 5 schools. You have to start every single one of these from scratch. Don't rehash your resume. I spoke to that a little bit about not writing your essays in a vacuum, but they have your resume for a reason. Your leadership stories or examples that you showcase in an essay situation should go deeper than just a bullet point on your resume, sharing more of the why and the how behind your story. Don't use lots of thesaurus words. And I've even seen some of my own clients doing this. And I was like, why are you using this word? Just use the straightforward one. As Jennifer indicated, you are not applying for a master's in English writing. Just say what you need to say. One of my big takeaways from my first year in business school was bullet points and buzzwords. Just get to the point, no flowery language. Just say what you need to say. Being concise in your communication is important in the business world. Don't try to be someone you're not. I've had numerous clients come to me and say, well, I'm just a consultant. How do I stand out as a consultant? And I don't ever start there. I start with who they are, independent of what job they have or what title. I want to get to know them as an individual so that they present an authentic and compelling narrative that is unique to them. And don't try to think, well, business school wants me to want to be an investment banker. I'm like, no, they don't. They want you to want to do something after business school that's meaningful to you and that their school will help you achieve. So be authentic and genuine. And finally, don't submit an optional essay unless it's necessary. There are really 3 reasons that you would write an optional essay. One is to explain a gap in your work experience since graduating from college. Another would be to explain poor performance either on a test or in undergrad. Perhaps your sophomore year got mono one semester and your grades tanked. You need to explain that. And the third reason is to explain your choice of recommenders if you are not using your current immediate supervisor. I've had people, when I was at Duke reading applications, oftentimes someone would just, as the optional essay, submit, oh, this is a great essay I wrote for another school. The last thing that an admissions reader wants to do is read more content than what they asked for. So don't just share an essay that you thought was great and was more that you wanted to say that wasn't related to the prompts that particular school offered. So in terms of next steps, MBA applications are complicated. There are lots of moving parts, lots of decisions to make. Jennifer spoke earlier about our team-based approach. We have a methodology that works and we stand behind it with our 4-school guarantee. So if you're serious about getting into a top MBA program and you want to take the steps to write essays that will get you accepted, reach out now. On our website, on every page, you will see a free consult link in the upper right-hand corner. Go there, fill out a consult request form. You will be sent a link to schedule time with myself or Jennifer or one of our other counselors. And we spend 30 minutes with you talking about your background, your goals, what schools are right for you, answering any questions you might have about the application process and how Stratus might help you. And with that, we're going to open up for questions. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the...
Yeah, so Susan, I've been answering a lot of questions that have come in, and I'm trying to see, there might be some that I haven't gotten to. If you have questions, please type them in and we'll get to them. I think I've gotten to most of these. Let's see. Okay, Rahman, why choose this program? So I don't know if you mean how do I tell the school why I'm choosing that school or not. If that's what you mean, then that's where the research that you're going to do fits in, and show them how the resources they have can help you reach your goals that you've laid out for yourself. Okay, any other questions? Okay, one that's coming in is how many schools should I apply to? And that, of course, is going to depend on so many things. We usually find that after maybe 4 or 5, possibly 6 schools in one round, people get a little burned out, and it's really hard to put forward too many more strong applications than that. There's no common app, so you got to kind of do everything uniquely for that school. So if you're ready to apply in round 1, then you do maybe kind of have a strategy where some number is in round 1, and then there might be more in round 2 if you come up short because it was only your stretch schools in round 1.
Right, I'll grab one of these questions. I'm assuming that after like 11:46, you haven't answered these, Jennifer. So what are some practical ways to show what you can contribute to an MBA class? So we talked about curriculum, we talked about clubs. So what perspective do you bring in a classroom situation? When you're put in a team to work on projects, at some schools you're put on a learning team for the whole year. Are you going to be the person who makes sure that the voice of the introvert is always heard? Or are you coming in with a background as an accountant and you will help classmates who need support in accounting? Perhaps your contribution to the class would be taking a leadership role in a particular club. And rather than just saying you want a leadership role, if you've connected with current leadership in that club, in your essay, you can state what you hope to do. Perhaps improve the liaison between the consulting club and the data analytics club so that consultants can better understand how data can be used to drive decisions. So everything's got to be unique to you.
Okay, here's one too that's newer. The HBS essay prompt is general. Yale has a specific essay question on the biggest commitment you've ever made. Can I have the same key themes or storyline? So absolutely, we often will find that somebody's HBS essay has some large similarities with what they're putting forward for Yale, but you have to make sure that for HBS, for example, you don't say the biggest commitment I've ever made is blah, 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 because they're going to know that you're repurposing that from Yale. So it has to be, it might have a bunch of the same content, but it has to be structured completely differently. And it's also probably doubly long. So there's going to be extra content in there as well.
Great. I've got one. Could you talk about some ideas on how we can structure our reflection exercises pre-application? Great question. Actually, Jennifer and I are doing a webinar on exactly that. I think it's June 4th. So if you go to the Stratus website, there's a webinar link under MBA. Sign up for that webinar. But I talked about some things. Think about what your motivations are. What are landmark experiences that have shaped who you are and what you value? What are you passionate about? What would your dream job be if you had no restrictions on your time, your talent, and you didn't need to make any money? These are all things you should be thinking about. And you should also use LinkedIn or other resources to explore positions that you might have post MBA. So that's, somewhat self-reflection, but also looking forward to building on your current skills and knowledge to be ready for whatever post MBA goal you might want to have.
Okay, so here's a question. How much do we need to talk about ourselves in the essay? I would say quite a bit because, well, it's going to depend on what the essay prompt is, but let's say it's a goals essay. So what do you want to do over the next 3 to 5 years, and what's your dream job, and how can Columbia help you achieve it, let's say? You're going to be talking about your career path, your passion, your interest in whatever your long-term and short-term goal is. And then you'll kind of pivot into Columbia and how those resources will help. Some schools like Stanford and Harvard and Yale give you more, and also Booth will give you a little more of a chance to be longer, and well, not Yale as much, that's only 500 words, but a little more introspective and telling more of a personal story than a simple goals essay might. But every essay is going to be talking about you to some degree. Personal, professional, both.
Yeah, in the end, the schools are trying to get to know you as a person. What sort of classmate will you be? What sort of contributor will you be in their environment? I don't think you answered this one yet, but Ankit wants to know, how do we choose between a 1-year and 2-year course in the post-COVID world? Kind of independent of COVID, you need to think about what your needs are from an MBA. For people who maybe just want to accelerate their career in a current industry or function, a 1-year MBA may be right for them. The 1-year programs typically don't have an opportunity for an internship, which may be necessary if you're trying to make a pivot or a career change. If you happen to have an undergrad in business, then a 1-year program like the Kellogg 1Y may be the right fit for you. You've already taken some of the core curriculum and can do in 4 Kellogg terms what most people do in 6. Other reasons for a 1-year versus a 2-year might be if you're an entrepreneur or you're in a family business and you just need to develop some new skills and don't have the time to take 2 years away from that business. A 1-year might be the right thing for you. So hopefully that answers your question. When we work on school selection, we want to find the best schools that are the right fit for whomever we're working with. A lot of people come to us thinking the 2-year full-time is the right option for them because that's what's most promoted out in the world. But we oftentimes will discover that, hey, a part-time might be the right type of format, or an executive MBA or mid-career program. There are tons of opportunities out there and options, and they're evolving year over year. And our team's really on top of that to help you find the right program.
Okay, so one question is, what is an optional essay? Can you elaborate on that, please? So pretty much every school is going to say, is there anything else you need to share with us? And I think Susan mentioned before this is not the place to just drop in content that you love that you wrote for another school. There's just a very finite number of reasons that you'd even include anything for the optional essay. If you have a lower GMAT and you might want to explain that you're taking a quantitative class, for example, to like MBA math to make up for a lower score, or maybe you're trying for a higher GMAT score, but it won't be until after you submit. So like something about that, something about maybe a lower GPA, perhaps you were going through a crisis in college and you want to not really excuse it, but just explain it in maybe a sentence or something like that. And then also, if you have a recommender you're using that is not a current supervisor, you need to explain why that is. But for many people, they will have no need to include an optional essay.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. I've got one here. Is the basic content of recommendations on similar lines as essays, highlighting how the individual is aligned to the school's mission statement? I've seen a number of questions, and Jennifer may have answered them when I wasn't able to see. Recommendations really have 3 pieces to them, with the exception of Wharton that has its own questions. But the schools want to know how long and what context has the recommender known you, and how do you compare to equally qualified peers, and kind of what is that peer group. They will want to know what your strengths are. with specific examples that show the how and the so what behind your impact. And most schools will ask a question either about weaknesses or about a time when that recommender has provided you with some constructive feedback and how you responded to that feedback. So it's entirely different when you will be asked to add your recommender names and emails to the online application. That will trigger an email from the school to your recommender with instructions on what's expected of them. GMAC, that hosts the GMAT, also has a common letter of recommendation that's accepted at quite a few schools. There's a long list on their website of what schools will take that common letter of rec. It makes it easier on your recommenders to just fill that out once and submit it to multiple schools. Schools are not looking for the recommender to understand their ethos and connect you to the ethos of that school. That's on you as the candidate.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. This question is, some schools want quantitative impact the applicant has had in their jobs. How do we approach these if they are not immediately clear? So you might mean a couple different things. One is what I just talked about, where if you really haven't had a lot of quantitative experience, how to sort of mitigate that in an optional essay, perhaps take a class at a community college, take an online math class like MBAmath.com. Maybe in your job, you are using spreadsheets, managing budgets. You can point to that. You can have a recommender speak to really solid quantitative ability there. If you're asking about how to show quantitative impact on a resume, sometimes it's hard in certain fields, and I certainly had it in public relations, trying to kind of show accomplishments and results in a quantitative fashion in those bullet points on my resume. It's just easier in some fields than others, to show maybe revenue that you helped your company gain or savings that you helped your company amass over some period of time or whatever. If you can't do that, you just do the best you can, being true to what you've actually done on your resume.
Great. Jennifer, I'm not sure if you answered this question. Ashish wants to know, can I start my essays parallel to my GMAT prep?
No, we haven't done that yet.
So yes, you can. Well, it depends on you. Everything depends. There are some people who are, have the bandwidth to juggle their work, their family, and do GMAT prep and work on essays. We often find that doing the self-reflection and introspection while preparing for a GMAT or GRE allows you to really understand why you want to go to business school, which may motivate you to buckle down and really get the test score that you want. One important piece about the GMAT or the GRE is that it defines your competitiveness at each school. So if you don't know where you're going to end up with the GMAT, you don't have a good sense of which schools are stretchy schools or super stretch schools versus target or likely schools. And you don't want to start working on essays only for the M7 schools, only to find out that you ended up with a 650 GMAT and you really don't have any shot at those schools. So make sure to find that balance. And that really is an individual decision in terms of what you're capable of doing.
All right, we probably just have time for one more here. So here's one that we haven't answered yet. I have 8 years of work experience since I graduated. I worked in a government agency, so I don't have business or consulting background. Do I have to work harder to justify why I need an MBA? No, you don't. You have to show why you need an MBA just like everybody else. And in fact, there are lots of people with wonderful government and nonprofit experience that has nothing to do with consulting or finance at all. And I think we all know that government could probably use a bit more rigor in the management sphere and kind of problem solving and being more nimble and getting things done, probably at all levels of government in all countries. So you probably have some really interesting stories to show there why you need that MBA. So don't discount the great experience that you've had.
Yeah, I'm going to certainly during COVID, folks who have that government experience and can bring that to a business school classroom, I think it's going to add a lot of value. Because now more so than ever, government and the private sector need to be working together to solve the problems that we're addressing in the world. So I think you'll have a really great story to tell. And I think we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to need to sign off. If you did enjoy this session, like it on, I guess, on Facebook Live or on the GMAT Club. So please, and share this with your friends. Do look on the Stratus website. We have some upcoming webinars about introspection and about building a resume and some others. And don't hesitate to reach out for a free consultation with me or Jennifer or other counselors on our team. Thanks for coming and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.